process, which is a little bit of an inverse of what we've just heard to some extent, where there was a strong sense of OA information and priorities developing that then over time have now been fully integrated into Maine's climate action strategy. So really excited to have Wendy sort of share that story and some of the information that's emerging as most relevant to climate priorities in Maine. So Wendy, go ahead and let's see, I can get my slides up here for you. And I would encourage folks to, if you have, we'll probably be really short on time. If you have questions, go ahead and use the chat box to ask them directly of presenters. If you would like, presenters feel encouraged to chat back. If not, I can collect questions at the end and distribute. So thank you for your patience, but go ahead and feel encouraged to ask questions that way. Great, so Wendy, can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can. Can you hear me?
I can, yes, indeed. Take it away.
All right, great. I'm glad Myron went over because a few minutes into his talk, there was a kind of a bang and our power went off. So I had to, I'm now on my phone and hopefully all is good.
You're doing great. I saw briefly
yeah.
that you exited and entered again, and I can hear you and see you. It all sounds great.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thanks, Jesse. So I'm Wendy Garland. I'm the Division Director for our Division of Environmental Assessment at the Maine Department of Environmental Protection. And I'll be talking to you about ocean and coastal acidification efforts here in Maine. But first, Jesse, if you can go to the next slide. In case you're not in the US, a little background on the state of Maine for perspective. We're in the northeasternmost corner of the US. Relatively rural states with a population of 1.3 million people. Most of our population centers are in southern Maine and especially along the coast. We have abundant water resources in Maine, including nearly 5,000 miles of coastline, and tourism and marine resources, including lobster, shellfish, and aquaculture are important to Maine's economy. Next slide. So given Maine's reliance on healthy coastal waters, there's been growing awareness, concern, and action around OA over the last decade or so. And in terms of that timeline, OA work started in earnest around 2014 when there was a legislation passed that authorized an OA study commission. And this commission worked over the course of a year to develop a report back to the legislature the following year in 2015 that presented recommendations and described the scope of the problem in Maine. Following that report, there was an effort to make that an ongoing permanent commission, which that did not pass, that bill, but it led to the formation of MOCA, which was a public-private partnership. It included 200 different people and was guided by a 38-member advisory group. And they were aiming to carry forth the recommendations of that report. And they did that through organizing symposia and bringing people together in meetings and getting information out through newsletters. And that work is continuing today, although other efforts that I'm going to describe shortly are kind of taking a greater role now. Another effort that would be worth sharing is the Maine Shell Day Monitoring Blitz event, which took place in August 2019. That was organized by the Northeast Coastal Acidification Network, or NECAN. They organized groups, including 60 different monitoring organizations in the Northeast, to go out and collect water samples and measure temperature, pH, and salinity, and at low, mid, and high tide cycles in different estuaries throughout the Northeast. And these water samples were then sent off to labs and to determine the total alkalinity. And so those initial findings were that there was a wide range in total alkalinity throughout the region and also throughout tidal cycles in certain estuaries. And then another of note would be in 2019, legislation was passed to establish the Maine Climate Council. This group then has picked up on and carried forward the work of MOCA as part of a broader climate effort. So next slide. So the work.
Sorry, Wendy. I've done terrible things. Oh no, I've done terrible things. I'm so sorry. Having a mouse issues. You go ahead.
Oh, yep, that's it. All right, good. So the work of this Maine Climate Council was supported by 6 working groups, including the Coastal and Marine Working Group, That included several members involved in MOCA and OA work. And their recommendations came together in the Maine Won't Wait Climate Action Plan, which was released in December 2020. And you can go ahead. One, would be great. So that climate action plan includes 8 general strategies, different types of strategies. If you can see it there, letter D does touch on OA. It's promoting kelp and seaweed aquaculture to help lower acidity of surrounding waters. Most of the OA related strategies though fall under strategy E, which I'll talk about on the next slide. You can progress. So those OA strategies that fell under E, that's that larger strategy, included developing and implementing a comprehensive coastal monitoring program, establishing a coordinating hub, and then surveying salt marsh and seagrass as part of a blue carbon inventory. So I'll talk a little bit now about where we're at with those 3 main OA related strategies in the climate action plan. Go ahead. All right, in terms of monitoring, there's a group that has been sort of an outgrowth of MOCA that have been working on doing some continuous monitoring in recent years, collecting pH and PCO2 data. They've sort of informally connected in the past to share information, but there's been a growing recognition that they need to more formally meet and develop shared protocols and SOPs so that the data can be used across the state and it can be shared. So this group they're calling themselves right now the Ocean Climate Collaborative, and I'm not sure if IV is on the call, but there's probably at least a few members of this group, which includes researchers, NGOs, state agencies, and tribes are part of this group working on collective SOPs for equipment selection and use, data collection, and data management so that there's good quality information being collected across the state when we're ready. Okay, next slide. In terms of the coordinating climate hub, we have good news on that front. We just found in the federal budget that was just passed for 2022 a few weeks ago that there's funding to establish the Maine Climate Science Information Exchange at the University of Maine. And so actually the staff person that's been hired with some private funding to get that underway is Parker Gassett, who's on the call today. He has been involved right from the start on OA efforts in Maine. So it's great to have him right at the center of this exchange. The initial phase of the Climate Hub is going to be coordinating climate change research in support of the action plan, but monitoring coordination will also be phased into this Climate Hub as well. Next slide. And then in terms of mapping of eelgrass and salt marsh, that was a strategy recommended in the action plan that would be fed into the blue carbon inventory. The work on that is in the past, Department of Marine Resources oversaw a coastwide mapping program in the 1990s and 2000s. But that program has not been, since then, there has been not been a statewide coastal mapping program. Fortunately, a bill, LD 593, was passed in 2021 to reestablish that program, which will be based in my agency, the Maine DEP, and run by Angie Brewer, who I think is on the call today here too. So starting in 2021, we'll be collecting low tide aerial photography using by plane, and then that will be followed up by underwater video work to produce maps of eelgrass distribution and cover estimates for the coast of Maine. So each of these surveys would produce a high resolution image and allow for assessments of change over time. And as we begin to implement this program in 2023, it will be on a 5-year rotating basis along, the 5,000 miles of coast will be divided up into different increments. Our goal is also to secure additional funding and resources so that while we're out doing this mapping work, we can also be collecting water quality, including OA monitoring data along each of these segments of coast as well. Next slide. So in terms of applications of this mapping and water quality data, I'll just highlight at least a few of those areas where we think that data is going to be really, really useful. First and foremost, it's part of the reason we have that mapping program reestablished is as part of the Climate Action Plan's Blue Carbon Inventory, so that we'll be able to feed into that the blue carbon for salt marsh and eelgrass into our figure out how much sequestration we have over time and help us meet our carbon neutral goal in the state. The mapping and water quality data will also support the aquaculture industry in Maine in terms of siting facilities to avoid the worst effects of coastal acidification, and also helping operations modify their operations to adapt to stressful conditions. For example, co-locating oyster and seaweed aquaculture. And then water quality standards. This additional data will also allow our agency to identify water quality concerns and shifts in the biological community, which are essential for helping us assess whether designated uses are being met. Currently, our standards do not account for degradation of habitat due to acidification parameters, so this additional data will help us move in that direction. And the information will also be used as for our wastewater discharge permits and siting of operations, so that we can inform those licenses and locations by OCA data. And then in terms of conservation and restoration, monitoring should help reveal where there are sensitive populations or chemically stressed waters. These areas could then be targeted for point source and non-point source pollution reduction work in the contributing watersheds. And we can also prioritize habitat restoration in those areas to help buffer acidic conditions. So those are some of the things that we're doing right now in the state of Maine, and some of the key players are on this call, and it's really a great group of people, and happy to answer questions, or I bet they could as well, and looking forward to learning from others on this call. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Wendy. That's an excellent presentation, and I've been waiting for the Alliance to be able to support this type of presentation, because I think it's such a great, just some real concrete specifics in the applied research, how that's informing specific climate priorities and even management applications, and then ideally how those things will perpetuate to leverage ongoing funding in perpetuity over space and time. And congratulations on the coordinating hub for climate research. That's a really meaningful support, obviously, for bringing all this together. So, and of course, the mapping work across various ecosystems for OA mitigation and remediation, in addition to many other co-benefits. So thank you. And really excited to have Maine as part of the Alliance. Like I said, go ahead.